G'day, we're here with Shailene Woodley, and Shay, I want to start off by asking you, how badly did you want this role of Hazel in The Fault in Our Stars?
I wanted it incredibly badly, I suppose. I read the screenplay about 2 years ago, and then I read the book immediately after, and it was one of those things that affected me on a really deeply cellular level. I found it incredibly healing, and I found the themes to be really vital in our day and age of presenting adolescence to the world in the form of big sort of dystopian type films and studio films. To have a movie that was really grounded and rooted in truth and authenticity and rawness and realness, as well as a movie that dealt with death but didn't deal with it in a manner of grieving over it. It's more about celebrating life than grieving about death, and I thought that that was a really beautiful healing tool for all of us to use in our personal lives, as death is something we all deal with as human beings.
Yeah, like it's a film that deals with a lot of death, but it also deals with a lot of love. And the thing I found interesting while watching this film is, in some ways, the circumstances that have brought these two people together, Hazel and Gus, is a very sort of unique and out of the ordinary sort of situation. But in some ways, they've got a very a love story that's very similar to a lot of other love stories, and their love's sort of no different to any other sort of love. How did you approach the love story element of the characters?
The love story. I mean, this movie, both of the characters are terminally ill with cancer, and it was important to us that we didn't play that. So I don't consider this a movie about cancer. I do consider it a movie about love, and in that regard, it was really exciting to for me as an adult to, I guess, get back in touch with what those feelings feel like when you do fall in love with another human being for the first time, because it's so different. There's so much innocence involved, and you're not quite jaded by relationships yet, so you're able to really give so much of yourself to another person. And Ansel and I had a lot of fun establishing that between Hazel and Gus. But ultimately, it wasn't. We didn't feel like it was our love story to dissect and create. We just wanted to breathe truth and life into the love story that John Green had originally created in his novel.
Yeah, and like being adapted from this book, it's sort of like sometimes books take years and years to get turned into a film, and it's a real struggle. The book sort of came out in 2012. The films come out in 2014. It seems like, this just sort of phenomenon of Fault in Our Stars like really picked up very quickly. And sort of, I guess, what experience did you have with the story and the book before the film? Had you heard of it much before, or?
I hadn't heard of the book before, or the story about it before I had read the script. But then, of course, the second anything comes into your frame of mind, it sort of starts appearing everywhere.
Oh, yeah. And what scene in the film did you find maybe the most challenging or the most interesting, or you think might be the biggest turning point for Hazel in the film?
I think the scene when she finally when she says, "I fell in love with him the way you fall asleep, slowly and then all at once." I think that that's such a beautiful quote, and one to remember. But also, when she finally allowed herself to be in love with this person, regardless of her own internal struggles and challenges with maybe having to leave him one day because of her illness, I thought that there's a lot of empowerment and a lot of beauty in that. So I think that that was sort of the catalyst in the movie.
And you've got also what I thought was like a really interesting scene was when you're on the swing set with him and you're talking about sort of why you can't be more than just friends and how you don't want to get too in, which you sort of touched on there with when she finally gives into that. And I think that was an interesting scene for really setting a very unique stakes for this relationship, that she talked about herself being this grenade that could go off at any moment. And it's sort of, what was it like sort of with cancer not being at the forefront of the film but still being that underlying thing that could creep into it at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love that scene because it demonstrates her own sort of selflessness in a way, you know, her own fear of what her condition will create for others. I think Hazel, she's so empathetic and so hyper aware of how her footprints in life do affect other people around her. That it was a really powerful scene for us to film, and then in the movie as well. It reminds me of the scene when she's with her parents, and she says, "I'm worried about what's going to happen to you when I'm gone." I think those are very valid fears. Most of the people in my life who I've ever met who are sick or have been sick in a very scary sort of terminal manner, their biggest fears aren't necessarily death itself for themselves. It's what their passing will create for others. And so I really appreciate and acknowledge John for putting that in his novel, as well as the director and producers for keeping it in the movie.
Was it particularly a sort of, I guess, challenging for you to have to play someone, a person with thyroid cancer, without making that completely what the performance is about, but at the same time sort of being true to the struggles of the illness?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of research before, not a little bit, a lot of bit of research about Hazel's particular condition, as far as how much she could breathe or not breathe, and I had a lot of conversations with the director about how far we would take that in the movie, but we decided that we didn't want to play cancer, that it would be evident with the plastic tubes and with her oxygen machine. Also, if I were to breathe life into her actual condition, the movie would be 5 hours long, just simply because she couldn't breathe. So it was definitely something that we researched and we were very well aware of, but something that we wanted to sort of be in the foreground, not in the front ground.
And what was it like working with Ansel? Because, like, I guess chemistry, like, and sort of having that work, not just your own sort of performance, but with someone else, is very important. And, like, in a lot of your films, like whether it's The Descendants, where you're sort of having to bounce off George Clooney and he's having to bounce off you, through to a sort of a more romantic relationship like you see in this film, what was Ansel like bouncing off?
It was amazing. I mean, Ansel and I had worked together on another film called Divergent a few months prior. And so because of that, we already had established a very close relationship. Naturally, we have very much brother-sister type dynamic. And so going into a movie like this where you do need to be vulnerable and comfortable because of all the intimacy, emotional intimacy, was such a luxury and such a gift, because we didn't have to go through the process as artists getting to know one another. We just got to jump into the characters and figure out how we wanted to bring the love component into it, because we don't naturally have that component in our relationship. So I thought it was really, we both just think that it was a big gift, and we got to talk about the movie for months before we actually started filming it.
That's cool. And you mentioned Divergent. Obviously, that film was a big hit, opened at #1, as did The Fault in Our Stars. Two such different films, a sci-fi action film and a much, very different budgets for both of those films, very different set, but they both just, they both made around $300 million at the box office. Like, what was it like having an experience like that, where you got two films that are so different but both are received so well?
It's exciting. I mean, I think they're completely, like you said, completely different. Divergent's sort of one of those movies that you watch as a form of escapism, because it deals with things that aren't common in our everyday realities. And Fault in Our Stars is one of those movies you watch and you leave affected by, because it is something that we can all relate to, whether it's death or falling in love or whatnot. And it's as an artist, it's fun to sort of jump into all these different colors and characters and explore and weave my way through them. So I guess from that side of it, it's just fun. It's like being on a playground. You play on the swings for a minute, and then you go down the slide. Check it out.
Yeah, and at the People's Choice Awards this year, you're nominated for Best Movie Duo twice, for Divergent and for The Fault in Our Stars. What's it like competing against yourself for that award?
It's not a competition. Is it a competition? Um,
Yeah.
no, I think it's funny. It'll be interesting actually. I think like socially, from a social experimental standpoint, to see which movie draws in each demographic in a more poignant way, I suppose.
Yeah, it'll split the Shea vote for the, for the People's Choice Awards. You're also nominated for Best Actress, I think, there, and so congratulations on that from all of us, from all of us at Gold Derby. Um, I guess what like with this film and with this particular performance that you have, was there something that you found? What was the hardest thing about playing Hazel?
The hardest thing. I think that I don't know necessarily that it was hard because John Green was on set every day, but it was something we were very conscious of, making sure that we committed ourselves to, and not just the actors, but the producers and the set designers and director, everyone involved, was that we didn't want to make a movie for ourselves. We just wanted to make John Green's film, and so that was something that was difficult in its own right, just because we were so keen on protecting the integrity of what he had originally created.
Yeah, no, definitely. And did you have any who is the biggest joker on the set?
Nat Wolff. He's the funniest person, maybe the funniest person I've ever met.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Did anyone pull pranks as well as George Clooney on the Fault in Our Stars
I
set?
think George is the king of pranks. I've yet to meet another human being in my life who can prank as well as he did, or does.
What was it like for the Descendants to get that Golden Globe nomination and to sort of break through there, especially at such a young age?
I mean, I was so young, and that was the first time I'd ever. I was so young. Not that I'm not anymore, but um, it was the first time I'd ever really experienced the other side of the industry, and it's always nice to be rewarded, I guess, or acknowledged for certain things, but that's not why I became an actor, and that's not why I love being on a movie set. So it was fun simply because every single day we were at a different event, but it was the family together, so we got to have our little Descendants reunions each and every day for a few months. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's appreciated, but it's not what I do it for, if that makes sense.
Because like when that film was done, you were a little younger, playing a teenager. In this film, Final Stars, you're still playing a teenager, but you're a bit older now. Was that a challenge having to sort of go back in time a bit for the role?
It didn't feel like a challenge then. It was interesting when I watched The Fault in Our Stars for the first time because I felt really nostalgic about it in a way because I recognized that it was probably the last young adult film I'll ever do because I don't feel like I can empathize with a teenager's experience like I could even a year ago. So in that way, it was a bit weird to watch, but because I felt like I knew Hazel and I knew her process and her internal weaving, and so it didn't feel difficult getting into her mind. Also, Hazel's sort of an old soul, so even though she was only 16, she felt like she could have been in her 20s just simply because of her innate wisdom.
Is there anything you felt like you've learnt from Hazel's innate wisdom through working on the film?
Absolutely. I mean, Hazel, the things that are apparent and things that she says in the book, you don't have to lead a long life to lead a meaningful life. She's not particularly caught up on leaving a stamp on the world or being remembered. She recognizes that moments are all that we have, and because of that, through the process of the film and the process of death involved in the film, she's able to celebrate life, and she's able to recognize the high points as well as acknowledge the low points, but really focus on that which is good in life. And I think that that's something that we could all sort of use a little bit more of in our modern day metropolitan societies.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Shay. We really hope that it'll be just nothing but good things come from this performance, that you can get acknowledged at the Golden Globes or maybe the Oscars this year for very emotional, but I think ultimately sort of a hopeful sort of performance in The Fault in Our Stars.
Well, thank you, and thanks for. I know it's super early over there, so thank you for being up so early.
No worries. Anytime, anytime.
All right.